The dim fluorescent lights of Starlight Haven flickered like hesitant stars against the worn beige walls of the community shelter. It was a place where forgotten stories gathered dust, where the air carried the faint scent of overcooked pasta and damp laundry from the shared machines in the basement. 9-year-old Kiara Brooks sat at a rickety folding table in the common room, surrounded by a handful of other kids whose faces mirrored her own quiet resignation. Her birthday cake, if you could call it that, was a lopsided square from the discount bakery down the street, topped with 9 mismatched candles that sputtered more than they burned. The shelter director, Mrs. Harlan, a woman with tired eyes and a voice softened by too many goodbyes, had scraped together a few bucks for it. "Make a wish, sweetie," she said, her hand gentle on Kiara's shoulder. But as Kiara closed her eyes and puffed out a breath that scattered the flames unevenly, the room felt emptier than ever. No family photos on the walls, no balloons sagging from strings, just the echo of her own whisper. A wish for someone, anyone, to remember she existed. Outside, the winter wind howled through the cracked parking lot, whipping snowflakes against the chain-link fence that bordered the shelter's edge. It was the kind of night that buried secrets deeper, the cold seeping into bones like an unwelcome guest. Kiara stared at the smudged frosting on her plate, her small fingers tracing the edge of a plastic fork. The other kids had already drifted back to their cots or the TV in the corner, murmuring about homework or tomorrow's school bus. She was used to this. The birthdays that blurred into ordinary days, the questions about her mom that Mrs. Harlan answered with vague nods and "someday you'll know more." But tonight, the ache felt sharper, like a splinter under her skin. Why her? Why always alone? The door to the common room creaked open, letting in a gust that rattled the paper plates. Mrs. Harlan glanced up from her clipboard, her brow furrowing. Standing there was a man who didn't belong in this world of faded linens and institutional grey. A biker, broad-shouldered and weathered, his leather jacket scarred from roads long travelled. Vincent St. Marlowe, 40 years old and carrying the weight of unspoken oaths, paused in the threshold. His boots left wet tracks on the linoleum, and the faint rumble of a motorcycle engine still lingered in his ears from the ride over. He wasn't here for the warmth or the company. He'd come alone, as he always did when old promises tugged at him. In his gloved hand, he clutched a paper bag, crinkled at the edges, wrapped with the careful precision of someone who rarely handled fragile things. Kiara looked up first, her dark eyes narrowing with the wariness of a child who'd learned trust was a luxury. The room fell silent, the other kids peeking from behind the couch. Mrs. Harlan stepped forward, her voice steady but cautious. "Can I help you, sir? We're just wrapping up a little birthday thing here." Vincent's gaze swept the space, landing on Kiara like a compass, finding true north. He removed his helmet, revealing salt and pepper hair cropped close, and a face etched with lines that spoke of deserts crossed and dawns witnessed. "I'm here for her," he said simply, nodding toward the girl. "Kiara Brooks. It's her birthday." The words hung in the air, simple yet loaded, drawing a ripple of confusion. How did this stranger know? The shelter wasn't listed in any public directory for outsiders like him. Kiara tilted her head, her chair scraping as she stood. She was small for 9, with braids tied back in faded ribbons, but her stare was unflinching. "Who are you?" she asked, the question cutting through the tension like a knife. Vincent knelt to her level, the leather of his knees creaking, and set the bag on the table with deliberate care. The scent of fresh wrapping paper mingled with the faint leather polish on his jacket. "Name's Vincent. Folks call me Saint on account of... well, that's a story for another time." He paused, his voice low and gravelly, carrying the timbre of engines revving at midnight. "I know it's your birthday because I was there when you came into this world. Not in the room, mind you, but close enough." Mrs. Harlan's hand flew to her mouth, memories flickering in her eyes. She'd heard whispers over the years, rumors of a biker who'd shown up one stormy night years ago, but nothing concrete. The other kids edged closer, drawn by the mystery unfolding like a scene from one of their smuggled comic books. Kiara crossed her arms, skepticism hardening her features. "You don't know me. Nobody does." Vincent's smile was sad, the corners of his mouth tugging downward, as if pulled by invisible weights. He reached into the bag and pulled out a small box wrapped in plain brown paper tied with twine. No frills, no bows, just honest intent. "Open it," he urged softly. "Your mom wanted you to have this." The word "mom" landed like a stone in still water. Kiara hesitated, her fingers hovering before snatching the box. The paper tore with a satisfying rip, revealing a wooden keepsake etched with faint carvings of stars, simple, like the shelter's name. Inside nestled a letter, yellowed at the edges, and a silver medallion on a chain, cool against her palm. She unfolded the paper with trembling hands, the script looping in a handwriting that felt like a ghost's touch. "My dearest Kiara," it began, "if you're reading this, it means you're old enough to carry a piece of me with you." Vincent watched as her eyes scanned the words, the room holding its breath. Serena Brooks had been 19, desperate and alone, when the Nevasca hit 9 years ago. Vincent had been riding through the outskirts, his Harley cutting through the blizzard like a lifeline, when he spotted her car stalled on the roadside. Pregnant, terrified, she'd flagged him down with waves that barely pierced the whiteout. No questions asked. He'd bundled her into his sidecar, improvised with blankets from his pack, and gunned it toward the nearest hospital. The roads were ice-slicked nightmares, the wind howling like judgment. But he pushed on, her labored breath sinking with the engine's roar. At the ER doors, as medics rushed her away, she'd grabbed his arm, her grip fierce despite the pain. "Promise me," she'd gasped, "that if I don't make it, you'll make sure she knows she was loved, and this for when she's 9. The doctor had handed him the letter and medallion later, after the complications claimed her. Vincent had nodded, pocketing them without a word, the weight settling into his soul like an anchor. He'd kept his distance since, watching from afar through shelter updates he'd quietly funded via the Harbour Saints, his motorcycle club brothers none the wiser to this solitary vow. The Saints were a tight-knit crew, bound by codes of loyalty forged in backroad runs and midnight oaths, but Vincent's secrets ran deeper, scars from wars fought and promises buried. Now, seeing Kiara's face crumple as she read of a father she'd never known, a soldier named Adrian Cole, deployed overseas before Serena could tell him, Vincent felt the ice around his heart crack. The medallion held 2 photos, one of Serena, radiant and young, and one of Adrian in uniform, his eyes fierce with unspoken futures. "He never knew," the letter explained, "but you're his legacy, Kiara. Strong like him, kind like me." Tears blurred Kiara's vision, but she didn't wipe them away. Instead, she looked at Vincent, the distrust melting into something raw and real. You kept this? All this time?" He nodded, rising slowly, the ache in his knees a reminder of miles logged for honor's sake. "A promise is a promise, kid. Doesn't matter how long the road." "Mrs." Arlen placed a hand on Kiara's back, the shelter's hum resuming around them, but changed, warmer somehow. Outside, the snow eased, the first stars piercing the clouds. Vincent knew this was just the beginning. The Saints would rally when they heard, their engines thundering in support of a girl who'd unknowingly bound them all. For in the world of forgotten oaths, one kept promise could light the way home. The common room at Starlight Haven seemed to hold its breath as Kiara clutched the medallion, her small fingers tracing the etched edges where the photos met. The silver chain dangled like a lifeline, catching the flicker of the overhead light, casting tiny reflections on the scuffed table. Outside, the wind had quieted to a whisper, as if the night itself were listening. Mrs. Harlan hovered nearby, her arms crossed tightly, a mix of protectiveness and curiosity etching deeper lines into her face. The other children had scattered to the edges of the room, their whispers like distant thunder, eyes wide with the thrill of a story unfolding in their midst. Kiara's voice broke the silence, small but steady, laced with a wonder that bordered on accusation. "She wrote this for me? About a dad I never met?" She looked up at Vincent, the medallion now looped around her neck, resting against her collarbone like a secret finally unearthed. Vincent leaned against the doorframe, his leather jacket creaking softly with the shift of his weight. The scent of snow and engine oil clung to him, a stark contrast to the shelter's stale warmth. He nodded once, his eyes distant, pulling him back to that blizzard 9 years ago. The howl of the storm, the desperate grip of Serena's hand as he helped her from the sidecar at the hospital doors. She did. Wrote it while they were stitching you up in the next room. Said you deserved to know where you came from, even if the road to get there was rough. Mrs. Harlan cleared her throat, stepping closer, her sensible shoes squeaking on the linoleum. "Vincent, saint, was it? We've heard bits about that night over the years. Donations coming in anonymously, always around this time. But why now? Why show up like this after all this time?" Her tone wasn't hostile, just the guarded practicality of someone who'd seen too many good intentions fade into the cold. Vincent's gaze met hers, steady as a horizon line. "Because promises don't expire. I told her I'd wait till she was 9, old enough to hold on to it without it breaking her. Kept it locked in my saddlebag all these years, riding through storms that tried to shake it loose." He paused, the weight of unspoken miles hanging in his words. The harbour saints, his chosen family of weathered riders, had no idea about this vigil. They'd patched him up after bar fights and backroad wrecks, shared beers under starlit skies, but this was his alone, a quiet oath etched deeper than any club tattoo. Kiara slipped the letter back into the box, folding it with care as if it might vanish. Her braids swayed as she tilted her head, studying Vincent like a puzzle half solved. "You drove her through the snow? Just like that? No one does stuff for strangers anymore." The innocence in her question pierced him, a reminder of the world's cynicism he'd long navigated. He crouched again, bringing himself eye-level, the faint scar on his jaw catching the light, a memento from a desert patrol gone wrong, back when wars left marks that no engine roar could drown. "Wasn't a stranger by the time we hit the highway. She told me about you kicking inside her, about dreams of a life beyond the mess. And your dad, Adrian. He was overseas, fighting in places that swallow letters whole. She tried to reach him, but the lines went dead. Complications took her quick after you were born. Doctors said it was the storm, the delay. But she made me swear, find a way to bridge that gap someday." The room felt smaller now, the air thick with the echo of lost time. One of the younger kids, a boy with tousled hair, edged forward, tugging at Kiara's sleeve. "Does he look like the picture? Your dad?" Kiara glanced at the medallion, flipping it open to reveal Adrian's face, strong jaw, eyes sharp with the fire of duty, a uniform crisp against a backdrop of dusty barracks. She shook her head slowly. "I don't know. Never seen a real soldier up close." But in her voice there was a spark, the first flicker of possibility in a life defined by waiting. Vincent straightened, feeling the pull of his own unfinished road. The Saints' clubhouse was a 40-minute ride north, a weathered warehouse by the docks, where Harleys lined up like sentinels. His brothers, Jax with his booming laugh, Lena the mechanic who could rebuild an engine blindfolded, lived by a code: ride for the fallen, stand for the silent. This could bind them to something bigger than club runs. Mrs. Harlan placed a hand on Kiara's shoulder, grounding her. We'll need to talk about this, young lady. Rules about visitors, about everything. But her eyes softened toward Vincent, a silent acknowledgement of the gift he'd carried like a talisman. He tipped his head, pulling on his gloves with deliberate slowness. I'll be back tomorrow. Got some folks who might help track down that name. Adrian Cole. Records get buried, but promises dig 'em up. Kiara nodded, clutching the box to her chest, the wooden stars pressing into her sweater. As he turned toward the door, the cold rushed in again, nipping at their ankles. The night outside was clearer now, stars punching through the clouds like distant signals. Vincent stepped into the parking lot, the gravel crunching under his boots, his breath fogging in the crisp air. He swung a leg over his Harley, the engine coughing to life with a low growl that vibrated through his bones. The headlight cut a path through the lingering snow, illuminating the chain-link fence as he throttled away. But in his rear view, the shelter's warm glow lingered. A beacon he'd ignited. Back at the clubhouse, he'd have to tell them, break the ice on his solitary secret. The Saints wouldn't just listen, they'd rev up, tires biting asphalt in pursuit of a father's ghost. For Kiara, this birthday wasn't an end, but an ignition key turning in the dark. As the road unfurled before him, the medallion's weight echoed in his mind. Not his to wear, but his to honor. The promise had bridged 9 years. Now it called for more. Miles away, in the quiet of her cot, Kiara lay awake, the letter's words replaying like a lullaby. A family, chosen by fate and kept by strangers. The dawn would bring questions, but for the first time, answers felt within reach. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The rumble of Vincent's Harley echoed off the deserted docks as he pulled into the Harbour Saints clubhouse, the engine's growl fading into the salty night air. The warehouse loomed like a forgotten fortress, its corrugated metal walls scarred by salt spray and years of coastal storms. Flickering neon from a half-burned-out sign buzzed overhead, Saints Haven, casting erratic shadows on the lineup of bikes parked in precise rows, their chrome glinting under the moon. It was past midnight, but the place hummed with life. Laughter spilling from the open bay doors, the clink of bottles, the faint sizzle of a grill winding down from the night's impromptu cookout. Vincent killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the weight in his chest. 9 years of solitude, and now he'd have to lay it bare. He swung off the saddle, boots thudding against the gravel-strewn lot. The cold bit at his knuckles as he stripped off his gloves, the medallion's memory, a ghost of silver and promise, still fresh in his mind. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged wood, motor oil, and the faint tang of whiskey. Jax, the club's enforcer with arms like coiled ropes and a beard that hid his easy grin, was wiping down the bar, while Lena, the sharp-eyed mechanic whose hands bore grease stains like badges, nursed a coffee at a scarred oak table. A few others, Rico with his quiet intensity and old-timer Gus nursing a pipe, lounged in mismatched chairs, trading stories of runs gone right and wrong. They looked up as Vincent entered, the door groaning on its hinges. "Look who decided to grace us with his holy presence," Jax boomed, clapping Vincent on the back hard enough to rattle his jacket. "Thought you were off on one of your ghost rides again. Pull up a stool. Lena's got that sludge she calls brew." Vincent managed a nod, sliding onto a stool that creaked under his weight. The club's heart was here, in these unpolished corners, walls lined with faded patches from rides past, a bulletin board pinned with maps of back roads and notes on fallen brothers. Loyalty wasn't shouted, it was lived, in the way they patched each other up after wrecks, shared the load on long hauls. But tonight, Vincent felt like an intruder in his own skin. He stared at his hands, calloused and scarred, before speaking. "Got a story. One that's been riding shotgun with me longer than most of you." The room quieted, the scrape of chairs signaling they were listening. Lena set her mug down, her dark eyes narrowing. She knew Vincent's silences better than most, having pulled shrapnel from his shoulder after a stateside skirmish years back. He started slow, the words gravelly, painting the blizzard night. The stalled car, Serena's pale face in the storm's glare, the desperate race to the hospital. She was 19, scared out of her mind, gave birth to a girl, Kiara, didn't make it through the night. Complications from the cold, the weight. He paused, the memories chill seeping back, the ER's fluorescent buzz and the doctor's grim handover of the letter and medallion. Jax leaned forward, elbows on the bar, his usual bluster gone. "You never said a word. All these years, dropping cash at that shelter like Santa on a hog. Why keep it locked down?" Vincent met his gaze, the club's code hanging between them. Secrets were respected, but truths bound tighter. "Promised her. Swore I'd deliver that letter when the kid hit 9. No fanfare, no club involvement, just me and the road." He pulled a worn photo from his inner pocket. Not the medallions, but one he'd snapped discreetly at the shelter earlier, Kiara, fierce-eyed, clutching the box. The saints crowded closer, passing it around, the silence heavy with the echo of engines idling before a big run. Lena traced the girl's braids with her finger on the photo, her voice soft but edged. "And now, you hand it off and ride away clean." Vincent shook his head, the confession spilling like oil from a cracked line. "Letter says the father's out there. Adrian Cole, soldier, deployed before she could tell him. Kid's been in that shelter since, thinking she's got no roots. But that medallion, it's got his face, his name. Serena begged me to make sure Kiara knew she wasn't alone." Gus puffed his pipe, smoke curling like question marks. "Wars bury men alive, Saint. Records get sealed. Addresses vanish. You aiming to dig 'em up?" Vincent's jaw tightened, the scar on his cheek pulling taut. "Yeah, for her. For the promise." The idea ignited something in the room, a spark that spread like wildfire on dry tinder. Jax slammed a fist on the bar, not in anger, but resolve. "Then we ride for it. Whole club's in. I've got a cousin in records, owes me from that dust-up in 18. We start with military archives, trace deployments." Lena nodded, already mentally mapping routes. "I can pull favors at the DMV, cross-reference names. Quiet like, no waves. Rico, the quiet one with a knack for tech, cracked his knuckles. Online trails, vets forums, old unit logs. If he's stateside now, we'll sniff him out." Gus chuckled low, a rumble from his chest. "Reminds me of that promise we made after the flood run. Ride for the ones who can't." Vincent felt the tension ease, the club's warmth wrapping around him like a well-worn vest. These weren't bloodkin, but brothers forged in chrome and asphalt. Ex-soldiers like him, mechanics, wanderers who'd chosen this patch over solitude. Adrian Cole might be a shadow, lost in the bureaucracy of bases and redeployments, but the Saints had unraveled worse knots for less. As they sketched a plan on a napkin, starting with a dawn call to contacts, a ride to the county clerk's office, Vincent pictured Kiara's face, the distrust yielding to hope. The medallion wasn't just silver, it was a key, turning locks on doors long shut. By the time the first hints of grey streaked the horizon, the clubhouse buzzed with purpose. Bikes were checked, engines tuned under Lena's watchful eye, the air alive with the promise of motion. Vincent stepped outside, the dawn light glinting off the water, turning the docks to liquid gold. He'd returned to Starlight Haven by noon. With news or not, Kiara deserved that much. But as he mounted his Harley, the club's roar building behind him, he knew this vow had multiplied. One man's oath now carried the weight of many, thundering toward a reckoning. Adrian Cole, wherever he rode his own shadowed path, was about to hear an engine he couldn't ignore. Yet doubt lingered, a faint shadow on the water. What if the father had moved on, built a life without ghosts? What if unearthing him cracked open wounds deeper than the sea? Vincent throttled low, the vibration steadying him. Promises didn't ask for easy roads. They demanded the ride. As the sun crested, painting the sky in hues of fire and resolve, the saints prepared to roll, for a girl, a mother lost, and the honor that bound them all. The morning sun sliced through the frost-laced windows of Starlight Haven, turning the common room into a patchwork of gold and shadow. Kiara sat cross-legged on her cot in the girls' dorm, the medallion hidden under her pillow like a talisman against the day's uncertainties. The shelter stirred with its usual rhythm, the clatter of breakfast trays in the kitchen, the murmur of Mrs. Harlan assigning chores, the distant honk of a delivery truck navigating the icy streets. But for Kiara, the world had tilted overnight. The letter's words replayed in her mind, Serena's looping script promising roots she could almost feel. A father named Adrian, whose photo stared back with eyes that mirrored her own quiet intensity. She fingered the chain absent-mindedly, the silver warming against her skin, wondering if promises like Vincent's could really bridge the gaps left by storms and silence. Mrs. Harlan knocked softly on the doorframe, her apron dusted with flour from morning pancakes. "Kiara, honey, you've got a visitor. That man from last night, he's back and he brought company." Kiara's heart stuttered, a mix of thrill and wariness propelling her to her feet. She smoothed her sweater, the one with the frayed hem, and followed the director down the hall. The air carried the faint scent of fresh coffee and exhaust fumes, hinting at engines idling outside. As they entered the common room, Kiara froze. Vincent stood by the window, his leather jacket slung over one arm, but he wasn't alone. Flanking him were three others from the Harbour Saints, Jacks, towering and broad, with a nod that softened his rugged features. Lena, compact and no-nonsense, wiping grease from her hands on a rag. And Rico, lean and watchful, clutching a tablet like a shield. The group turned as one, their presence filling the space without overwhelming it, boots planted firm but eyes gentle, like guardians from a half-remembered dream. Mrs. Harlan busied herself with a stack of papers at the table, giving them space, though her glances darted like sentinels. Vincent stepped forward first, his voice a low rumble that cut through the morning hush. "Morning, kid. Told you I'd be back. These are my ride or dies, the Saints. We don't do half measures." Kiara edged closer, her gaze flicking from face to face, the medallion's weight a steady anchor. "You found him? My dad?" The hope in her voice was fragile, threaded with the fear of another empty trail. Vincent shook his head, but his expression held steady resolve, the lines around his eyes deepening like cracks in sun-baked earth. "Not yet, but we're on it. Started at dawn, called in favors, sifted through old logs." He gestured to Rico, who tapped his tablet, pulling up a blurred scan of a military roster. The screen glowed softly, names scrolling like ghosts in the digital ether. Adrian Cole, enlisted 16, last posted to forward ops overseas. Deployments shuffle folks like cards in the wind. Bases change, contacts fade, but we got a lead. A vet's network mentioning a Cole stateside now, working security up north. Lena chimed in, her tone practical, laced with the grit of someone who'd rebuilt lives from wreckage. Checked hospital records from that night too. Serena listed him as next of kin, but the notice never went through. Storm knocked out lines, paperwork got buried in the chaos. Jax knelt to Kiara's level, his massive frame folding with surprising grace, the scent of leather and sea salt wafting from him. "Listen, Squirt, your mum's promise. It's ours now. We ride for family, blood or chosen. Adrian might not know you exist, but that's on the world's mess, not you." His words carried the weight of shared scars, tattoos peeking from his sleeve, faint echoes of battles won and lost. Kiara nodded slowly, the knot in her chest loosening just a fraction. For the first time, the shelter didn't feel like an endpoint. It was a waypoint, engines humming on the horizon. Outside, the parking lot gleamed with melting snow, puddles reflecting the overcast sky like shattered mirrors. The Saints' bikes stood in a loose semicircle, Harleys polished to a gleam, their chrome catching the light in sharp flashes. Vincent led Kiara to the door, the group trailing like a protective convoy. The cold air nipped at her cheeks, carrying the metallic tang of winter's retreat. She stared at the machines, their saddles worn smooth from countless miles, evoking images of roads untraveled, highways stretching toward unknown homes. "You really think he'll want to know me?" she whispered, the question hanging fragile in the breeze. Vincent placed a hand on her shoulder, light as a vow. "Wants don't always start the ride, but showing up does. We've all got ghosts, mine from sands far off, yours from that blizzard. But loyalty, it pulls you through." As if on cue, Rico's tablet chimed, a soft alert breaking the moment. He scanned it quickly, his face tightening, hit a snag. Cole's files sealed, veteran privacy protocols. Need a deeper dive, maybe a contact at the VA. Lena cursed under her breath, but Jax clapped Rico on the back. "Snags are just detours. We reroute." The exchange was seamless, a rhythm born of trust, reminding Kiara of the family's quiet strength her mother had described in the letter. Bonds forged not in blood, but in the fire of standing firm. Mrs. Harlan watched from the doorway, arms folded, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. These outsiders, with their rumbling machines and hidden depths, had pierced the shelter's veil of routine. Vincent turned to Kiara one last time, crouching to meet her eyes. "We'll check in daily. You hold that medallion tight. It's your compass." She nodded, slipping back inside as the group mounted up. Engines roared to life in unison, a thunderous chorus that vibrated through the ground, shaking loose the last flakes of snow from the fence. Vincent led the pack, his Harley surging forward, the others falling in line like stars aligning in the dawn. As they hit the open road, the coastal highway unfurled, waves crashing against the rocky shore in rhythmic applause. The wind whipped at Vincent's jacket, carrying the salt spray and the faint echo of Serena's gasp from that fateful night. Doubt flickered again. What if Adrian had sealed his past, built walls higher than any deployment zone? But the club's formation pushed it back, tires gripping asphalt with unyielding purpose. Back at the shelter, Kiara pressed her face to the window, watching the taillights fade into the distance, red beacons of motion in a still world. The medallion warmed against her chest, a silent pulse syncing with the promise's beat. For the first time, alone didn't mean forgotten. It meant waiting for the roar that would return. Miles away, in a nondescript office tucked behind a veterans' hall, an unseen thread began to unravel. A clerk, prompted by a saint's favor called in over crackling lines, pulled a file from dusty archives. Adrian Cole's name surfaced, linked to a quiet life in the hills. Security guard by day, haunted by nights of what-ifs. The search was gaining traction, ethical hurdles be damned by the moral imperative driving it. Vincent throttled higher, the road blurring into possibility, knowing each mile honored not just Serena's words, but the redemption found in keeping them alive. If this story is touching your heart, hit that like button to show your support. The coastal highway twisted like a vein through the rugged cliffs, the afternoon sun casting long shadows that danced across the asphalt like fleeting memories. Vincent led the Saints' convoy, his Harley cutting the wind with a steady roar, the salt air whipping against his face and carrying the briny tang of the ocean below. Jax rode flank left, his massive frame hunched forward, while Lena and Rico trailed in tight formation, their bikes humming in sync, a mechanical heartbeat pulsing with purpose. They'd left Starlight Haven hours ago, the shelter's silhouette shrinking in their mirrors like a chapter closing. But Kiara's face lingered in Vincent's mind, those wide eyes, the medallion glinting as she waved goodbye. The snag from Rico's tablet gnawed at him. Sealed files, bureaucratic walls built higher than any war zone he'd known. But promises didn't yield to red tape. They demanded a breach, ethical or otherwise. They pulled into a roadside diner off the old state route, a weathered joint called Tide's End, where the parking lot was dotted with rusted pickups and the faint scent of fried onions mingled with diesel fumes. The neon sign flickered erratically, buzzing like a trapped hornet as the group dismounted, boots crunching on gravel pocked with oil stains. Inside, the air was thick with the hum of conversation from truckers and locals, the jukebox crooning a faded country tune about lost roads and second chances. Vincent claimed a corner booth, the vinyl seats cracking under his weight, while the others slid in around him. A waitress with a name tag reading May poured coffees without a word, her eyes flicking curiously at the leather vests emblazoned with the Saints patch, a stylized anchor wreathed in thorns, symbolizing chains broken by loyalty. Rico set his tablet on the table, the screen's glow cutting through the dim light like a beacon. VA contact came through. Old army buddy of mine. Odes for pulling him out of a ditch last summer. Says Cole's files locked under veteran protection clauses, but there's a workaround. Cross-reference with civilian records. He's got a P.O. box up in the hills near Eldridge. Security firm, guarding some corporate site. Lena leaned in, her grease-stained fingers tapping the edge of her mug, the steam rising in lazy curls. Eldridge. That's 2 hours north, through the pines. We ride up, scope it quiet. No badges, no noise. Jax grunted in agreement, his beard brushing the table as he hunched over a napkin, sketching a rough map with a pen borrowed from May. If he's there, we don't spook him. Just confirm, get a read. Kid deserves truth, not a storm. Vincent stared out the window, watching waves crash against jagged rocks far below, the foam white as unresolved grief. The diner's clock ticked steadily, marking time he'd spent carrying Serena's vow like an extra saddlebag, through club runs that tested their bonds, nights alone under starless skies where doubt crept in like fog. Adrian Cole, a name from a faded photo, a soldier who'd shipped out before life twisted into tragedy. What if he'd buried that chapter, forged a new path without the weight of what-ifs? Vincent's own scars itched under his shirt, reminders of deployments where brothers were lost to sand and silence, promises whispered in foxholes that echoed into civilian life. The Saints weren't just riders, they were redeemers, piecing together fractured legacies with the same hands that gripped throttles through tempests. As the coffees cooled, Rico's tablet pinged again, pulling up a grainy photo from a public vets forum. Adrian Cole, older now at 38, his frame leaner, hair cropped short, standing at a memorial wall with a distant gaze that spoke of horizons unseen. The caption read, "Honoring the fallen, one shift at a time." Vincent's chest tightened. The man's eyes held the same quiet fire as Kiara's, a shared inheritance waiting to ignite. "He's real," Vincent murmured, the words grounding the group. Lena nodded, her voice low. "Then we make contact. Letter first or face-to-face?" Debate rippled around the table. Jax pushing for direct, Rico cautioning patience. The moral tightrope of intrusion versus revelation swaying beneath them. In their world, loyalty meant riding into the unknown. But justice demanded care, not collision. They hit the road again as the sun dipped lower, the highway climbing into forested hills where pines whispered secrets to the wind. The air grew cooler, laced with resin and earth, the bike's engines echoing off granite outcrops like calls to assembly. Eldridge emerged as a cluster of modest homes and timber mills, the streets quiet under a canopy of evergreens that filtered the light into emerald shards. Vincent signaled a pull-off at an overlook, the group idling down to a hush. From there, they spotted the security firm. A low-slung building with floodlights and a chain-link perimeter, trucks bearing the logo Coal Guard Services. Rico's binoculars confirmed it. A figure matching Adrian's description patrolling the lot, flashlight beams sweeping methodically, his posture straight as a salute. Heart pounding like an over-revved motor, Vincent dismounted, the gravel shifting under his boots. The others hung back. Engines off now, the silence amplifying the distant crash of a stream. He approached on foot, keeping to the tree line, the chill seeping through his jacket. Adrian paused near the gate, lighting a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his face, lined with the wear of unseen battles, eyes scanning the dusk like a man forever on watch. Vincent stopped short, hidden in shadow, weighing the moment. This wasn't a raid, it was a bridge, tender as the medallion's chain. "Adrian Cole," he called softly, stepping into view, hands open at his sides. The man spun, hand instinctively dropping to his belt, tension coiling like a spring. "Who the hell are you? This is private property." His voice was rough, edged with war's residue, but Vincent saw the flicker, recognition of a kindred road-weary soul. "Name's Vincent Marlowe, Harbour Saints. Not here to cause trouble. Got something from 9 years back. A woman named Serena Brooks." The name landed like a dropped wrench. Adrian's cigarette falling to the ground, sparks scattering, his face paled, the guard dropping as questions flooded his eyes. "Serena? She? What is this?" Vincent pulled the letter's copy from his pocket. Not the original, but a scanned duplicate for this very crossroads, holding it out like an olive branch forged in chrome. Adrian took it hesitantly, unfolding the paper under the gate's harsh light, his breath catching on Serena's words. The forest held still, pines rustling faintly as the truth unfolded. A daughter born in storm, a life unlived because fate's wires crossed. Tears welled unbidden, tracing paths down his stubbled cheeks. "A kid? Mine? Why now?" Vincent's response was steady, the saint's distant silhouettes a silent testament. "Because promises outlast the miles. She's waiting, Adrian. Name's Kiara, 9 today." The words bridged the chasm, Adrian's shoulders slumping as resolve took root. He nodded, crumpling the paper gently. "Take me to her. God, take me." Back on the bikes, the return ride thrummed with electric anticipation. Adrian squeezed onto Jax's rear saddle, the convoy swelling by one. The hills blurred into twilight, stars emerging like witnesses to redemption. Vincent led, the road ahead clear, Serena's vow no longer a solitary burden but a shared flame. At Starlight Haven, lights glowed welcoming. Kiara's silhouette in the window, a girl on the cusp of family reclaimed. The engine's roar announced them, not as intruders, but as bearers of home. In the quiet honor of kept words, the circle closed, one promise at a time. The taillights of the Saints' convoy pierced the gathering dusk like fireflies on a mission, weaving through the winding coastal road that hugged the cliffs. Vincent throttled steady at the lead, the Harley's vibrations sinking with the pulse in his temples, the salt wind tugging at his jacket like an impatient hand. Behind him, Jax's bike carried the extra weight of Adrian Cole, the former soldier gripping the handles with white-knuckled resolve, his face a mask of shadowed wonder under the helmet Jax had thrust upon him. The air hummed with the chorus of engines, Lena's precise revs, Rico's low growl, a symphony of loyalty cutting through the twilight chill. Pines gave way to open stretches where the ocean's murmur rose like a distant applause, waves crashing against rocks worn smooth by relentless tides. Adrian's presence shifted the ride's rhythm, no longer a hunt but a homecoming, fragile as the medallion swinging against Kiara's chest miles away. Adrian leaned forward slightly, his voice barely audible over the roar. "How long's the kid been alone?" Jax glanced back in the mirror, his beard whipping in the breeze, eyes steady on the road. 9 years. Shelter's kept her safe, but safe ain't the same as whole. Vincent's been her shadow, donations, check-ins. Now we're filling in the gaps. The words carried back on the wind, weaving into the group's unspoken bond. Adrian nodded, the motion lost in the blur, but inside, memories flooded. Serena's laugh in stolen moments before deployment, letters that never arrived. The void of a life interrupted by orders and sand-swept bases. He'd returned stateside 2 years prior, piecing together security gigs to outrun the ghosts, but none had prepared him for this. A daughter, forged in his image, waiting in a place he'd never known. As Starlight Haven came into view, its modest lights blooming against the darkening sky like hesitant beacons, Vincent signaled the slowdown. The convoy eased into the parking lot, engines winding down to a collective sigh, gravel crunching under tires as they formed a loose circle near the chain-link fence. Snowmelt pooled in shallow dips, reflecting the first stars, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and cooling metal. Mrs. Harlan emerged from the front door, her silhouette framed by the warm glow spilling out, arms crossed, but her stance softer than before. Kiara hovered behind her, peeking from the threshold, her braids catching the porch light, the medallion glinting like a secret revealed. Vincent dismounted first, boots hitting the ground with a solid thud, and helped Adrian off Jax's bike. The soldier, civilian now, but carrying the straight-backed poise of duty, removed the helmet, running a hand through cropped hair matted by the ride. His jacket, borrowed from Rico, hung loose on his frame, but his eyes locked on the door with a hunger that transcended words. The saints fanned out subtly, Lena wiping her hands on her jeans, Jax cracking his knuckles in quiet support, Rico pocketing his tablet like a talisman retired. No fanfare, this was their way. Silent sentinels, allowing the moment to breathe. Kiara stepped forward, her small frame silhouetted against the shelter's hum, the other kids' faces pressing against windows like curious shadows. Mrs. Harlan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, whispering encouragement, but Kiara shrugged it off. Drawn by an invisible thread, she stopped a few feet away, eyes wide and searching, flicking from Vincent to the stranger. The medallion rose and fell with her quick breaths, the silver chain a bridge across the years. Adrian knelt slowly, the damp gravel biting through his knees, bringing himself to her level. The world narrowed to that space between them, the faint scent of pine clinging to his clothes, the distant lap of waves underscoring the hush. "You're... Kiara?" His voice cracked, rough from disuse and emotion, the words hanging like mist. She nodded, clutching the wooden box from the night before, her fingers white-knuckled. "And you're the one from the picture. Mum's letter." The confirmation hit Adrian like a shockwave, his gaze tracing her features, the curve of her jaw, the spark in her eyes mirroring his own from faded photos. Tears welled, unashamed, tracing paths down his weathered cheeks. "I didn't know. God, I didn't know about you. Serena, she tried to tell me, but the world got in the way. Deployments, blackouts. I came back thinking I'd lost her, but you're the best part of us both." Kiara's lower lip trembled, the distrust from the previous night dissolving into a raw vulnerability. She opened the medallion with deliberate care, holding it out, the photos side by side, a frozen family. "She said you were strong, like a protector." Adrian reached out, his hand hovering before gently touching the chain, the contact electric. I want to be that for you now. If you'll let me, these past years, I've been drifting, guarding empty lots when I should have been here." The admission poured out, laced with the regret of battles fought far from home, promises to comrades that paled against this one unspoken vow. Vincent watched from the sidelines, the club's presence a quiet anchor, their leather creaking softly in the breeze. Lena's eyes misted, a rare crack in her mechanic's armor, while Jax placed a heavy hand on Vincent's shoulder, a nod of shared redemption. Mrs. Harlan wiped her eyes with her apron, the shelter's routine yielding to this pivotal scene. Kiara stepped closer, her small hand slipping into Adrian's larger one, the connection sealing like asphalt under fresh tar. Vincent kept her promise. He said you'd come. Adrian looked up at the biker, gratitude etching deeper lines into his face. "I owe you everything, man, for carrying this when I couldn't." The group converged slowly, the saints forming a loose circle of welcome, their voices low murmurs of introduction, Jax's booming warmth, Lena's practical nod, Rico's quiet assurance. Inside, the common room awaited, its fluorescent lights now symbols of new beginnings, rather than faded hopes. As Kiara led her father through the door, hand in hand, the medallion swinging freely, the night air seemed to lighten, the stars overhead brighter witnesses to oaths fulfilled. Adrian paused at the threshold, turning back to Vincent with a salute, subtle, soldier to soldier. "Ride with us sometime. Family's bigger now." Vincent nodded, mounting his Harley as the door clicked shut, the engine's low rumble a farewell laced with satisfaction. The convoy would linger nearby tonight, engines silent but ready, guardians of this fragile reunion. Miles of road had led here, through blizzards and secrets, but the promise's core burned steady. Redemption not in grand gestures, but in the quiet honor of showing up. Back inside, laughter tentatively echoed, Kiara's first real birthday extending into something eternal, a family chosen by fate, bound by the unyielding pull of kept words. The ocean whispered approval, waves rolling in like applause for the mended circle, as dawn's promise edged the horizon. The first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the Starlight Haven parking lot in soft hues of pink and gold, the melted snow glistening like scattered diamonds on the gravel. Inside the common room, the air hummed with a tentative warmth, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with the faint, comforting aroma of toast from the kitchen. Kiara sat at the rickety table, her small hands wrapped around a mug too large for them, steam rising in lazy spirals that caught the light filtering through the windows. Adrian Cole sat beside her, his broad shoulders hunched slightly, as if still adjusting to the gravity of the night before. His eyes, shadowed by fatigue from the hurried ride, never left her face, tracing the subtle echoes of Serena's smile in her quiet expressions. The medallion rested openly on the table now, its silver surface etched with the patina of time, the photos within a bridge no longer hidden. Mrs. Harlan moved about the space with purposeful grace, setting out plates of scrambled eggs and fruit, simple fare elevated by the morning's miracle. The other children stirred from their cots, drawn by the unusual murmur of voices, peeking in with wide-eyed curiosity. But this moment belonged to father and daughter, the saints lingering just outside like faithful outriders, their bikes lined up in silent vigil. Vincent leaned against the fence, arms crossed, the chill of the early air nipping at his exposed neck. He'd watched reunions before, club brothers reclaiming lost kin after long hauls, but this one carved deeper, a fulfillment of the oath that had shadowed his rides for nearly a decade. The engine oil on his gloves still carried the night's residue, a reminder that promises were forged in motion, not stillness. Kiara broke the silence first, her voice soft but threaded with the resilience that had carried her through shelter nights. "Mom wrote that you'd protect things, like gates or something." She glanced at the medallion, flipping it open to Adrian's photo, the image now alive before her. Adrian's laugh was low, rumbling like distant thunder, a sound warmed by relief. Yeah, something like that. Spent years guarding warehouses, convoys in places where trust was scarcer than water, but none of it mattered like this. He reached out, his calloused fingers brushing hers, the contact tentative at first, then steadying. The touch spoke volumes, of deployments that stole moments, of letters lost in transit, of a life rebuilt in isolation until Vincent's voice had shattered the quiet. I thought Serena was gone for good. Came back stateside, took jobs to keep the ghosts at bay. Never imagined she'd left me this gift. Outside, Jax paced the lot, his boots kicking up faint puffs of damp earth, while Lena tinkered with a loose chain on her Harley, the metallic clinks punctuating the dawn. Rico scrolled through his tablet one last time, confirming the threads they'd unraveled. Adrian's sealed files bypassed through old unit contacts, a P.O. box forwarding to Eldridge that led straight to his door. The Saints Network, veterans forums, back-channel favors, had turned bureaucracy into a navigable road, their loyalty a force that bent obstacles without breaking them. Gus had joined them by now, arriving on his vintage Indian with a thermos of strong brew, his pipe unlit but tucked in his vest. "Told you, Saint," he murmured to Vincent, clapping a weathered hand on his shoulder. "One oath pulls the whole crew, like that flood run. Saved a town, gained a brother." Vincent nodded, the weight lifting from his chest like fog burning off the sea. These riders, scarred by their own wars and wanderings, had chosen this path, not for glory, but for the quiet honor of mending what time tore apart. Inside, the conversation flowed haltingly at first. Kiara sharing snippets of shelter life, the shared stories around the TV, the way Mrs. Harlan's hugs felt like anchors on tough days. Adrian listened, his soldier's discipline yielding to a father's hunger, absorbing every detail as if mapping a new territory. "We'll figure this out," he promised, his voice gaining strength. "Papers, visits, whatever it takes. You're not staying here alone anymore?" Kiara's eyes brightened, the wariness from her birthday eve dissolving into a spark of belonging. She pushed the medallion toward him. "She wanted you to have this too. Said it was for both of us." Adrian accepted it, looping the chain around his neck, the silver settling against his collarbone like a long-lost insignia. The gesture sealed something unspoken, a legacy reclaimed from the blizzard's grasp. As the sun climbed higher, casting elongated shadows across the lot, the saints gathered near the door. Vincent entered last, his presence drawing nods of gratitude from Mrs. Harlan, who busied herself clearing plates to mask her emotion. Adrian rose, extending a hand that Vincent clasped firmly, the grip speaking of roads shared and burdens lifted. "You rode through hell for this, Marlowe. Harbor Saints, heard of you boys. Code like ours, from the sands." Vincent's smile was rare, etched with the satisfaction of closure. "Family's what we make it. Ride safe, Cole. Doors open." The group exchanged quiet farewells, Jax ruffling Kiara's hair with a gentleness belying his size, Lena slipping her a small toolkit. "For fixing what's broken, kid." Rico added a contact card. "For when you need backup." The convoy revved to life outside, engines harmonizing in a farewell roar that vibrated through the shelter's walls, shaking loose the last remnants of isolation. Adrian watched from the porch, Kiara at his side. As the bikes pulled away, Vincent leading, the line stretching into the morning light like a promise extended. The road ahead for them was uncertain, legal hurdles, adjustments to a bond, 9 years in the making. But in that shared gaze, the moral compass held true, justice not in vengeance but in the poetic rightness of truth unveiled. Serena's letter, now folded in Adrian's pocket, whispered of redemption, a child's birthday transformed from solitude to legacy, a biker's vow rippling into a family's rebirth. Weeks blurred into a new rhythm at Starlight Haven, the shelter's hum now laced with visits, Adrian's truck rumbling in weekly, bringing takeout and stories of distant bases, Kiara's laughter echoing brighter. The Saints became occasional fixtures, their leather a comforting contrast to the beige routine, dropping by with gear for school or tips on two-wheeled adventures. Vincent rode solo more often now, the saddlebag lighter without its secret cargo, but the club's bond tighter, woven with this tale of honor kept. In quiet moments, under starlit skies, he'd trace the scar on his jaw, remembering the Navaska's howl and Serena's gasp. Promises survived not by force, but by the silent courage to carry them home. For Kiara, the medallion was no longer a relic of loss, but a talisman of arrival, a reminder that family chose you and loyalty rode eternal. Thank you for riding along on this journey of promises and redemption. If these stories of quiet honor touch your soul, please subscribe for more tales that remind us of the roads worth traveling.